So Dr. Galperin will speak this late afternoon about Estonia, its history, its musical traditions, its contribution to modern democracy, and most importantly, electronic government and the digital society. Let's welcome Dr. Galperin.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I would like to thank Dean Hawkes for introducing me, and it's an honor to be part of the Provost Colloquium series. Can everyone hear me? Do I need to use a microphone, or are we okay? Well, there is an old Soviet joke. If a Soviet engineering design bureau sets out to design a refrigerator, the result, the output, is an AK-47. So why am I mentioning that? Well, I guess if you ask me to give a talk about electronic government, the result is talk about music. And part of my talk will be about music because I like it, and also music is so much a part of Estonian identity. Dean Hawkes has already mentioned that I work as an interpreter for the US Department of State, and I'll mention a little more about that. It's good to know foreign languages. I'm fluent in only one foreign language, but yet that enables me to be part of great experiences just about every summer, and an occasional winter break to go to interesting countries, to meet people I would never met otherwise, celebrities, cabinet level ministers, and occasional head of state. So it's great to know foreign languages, and this is a good time at ESU to learn foreign languages. We have Spanish, obviously, a strong program in Spanish. And also, I would like to mention to anyone who might be interested that starting this spring, we're likely to have Japanese for the first time in quite a few years. That was my piece regarding one of my pet projects, language education. But let's go to, well, Estonia. When I work for the US Department of State, it is usually for the Bureau of Educational Cultural Affairs, which runs citizen diplomacy projects, cultural exchange or professional exchange projects. This past summer, I was working for the US House of Representatives Democracy Partnership Program, and that program was run also by the International Republican Institute, and that program was run in Estonia. And the idea of that project was that Estonians, not Americans, that doesn't usually go over very well, Estonians teach others from the former Soviet Union how to better run their governments. But being in Estonia, working in Estonia, was an eye-opening experience in many ways, and I thought that I'd share some of it because, well, if it was eye-opening to me, so I thought that others might discover something new from it as well. So, how often do we hear about Estonia? It was actually in the news recently, mentioned in the news recently, for an interesting reason. It is one of very few countries who actually pay their fair share of NATO expenses. NATO members are supposed to contribute 2% of their, at least 2% of their gross domestic product to, of their budget to NATO. And Estonia is one of only three, someone might correct me, but one of very few countries who actually do that, do contribute their fair share. And I'm not surprised. Having worked in Estonia, I can tell they like to do things right. Now, here are some dry facts about Estonia. It's a small country. You can barely see it on the map of Europe. The area is about 1.5 times that of New Jersey, so it's not a big country. The population, 1.3 million people. That's a smaller suburb, a smaller borough of New York City. So, well, what else? Independent for the past 25 years, a very young country. European Union member and NATO member since 2004 for the past 12 years only. Now, yes, it is a young country, but let me talk briefly about Estonian history. It's both a very old country. It's one of the earliest inhabited places in Europe. Archaeological finds date back to well over 10,000 years. And the history of Estonia, we could probably spend a semester talking about the history of Estonia, because it is in the crossroads of Northern Europe. Everyone was fighting over that territory for the past many years. The Crusaders took it during the Northern Crusade, and then after that, the Livonians, the Poles, the Lithuanians, the Swedes, the Russians, everyone around was fighting over that territory, and so the history is quite eventful, and we don't have much time to talk about it, but the one thing to keep in mind is that the national and cultural identity of Estonia was always under pressure and always under threat from all the invaders that was coming from every direction. So that's one thing I want to mention from the history of Estonia. And, well, other than it being a paying member of NATO, what else is Estonia known for? Anyone can think of something that came out of Estonia that we all use, or at least used to use every day? Starts with S? Skype, yeah. Skype came out of Estonia. Skype was developed in Estonia way back when, and there is a reason for it, and I'm being half serious about that. Yes, this is the Skype logo. And there is a reason for that. And this is a picture of a nice sunny summer day in Estonia. Past July I was there, I took this picture. So this is what passes for a very nice sunny day in Estonia. And there is a joke that Estonia, at least Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, and this is a view of the Tallinn skyline. Tallinn enjoys 12 months of bad skiing weather. And oftentimes you don't want to get out of, you don't want to go out in Tallinn, and maybe that's why they invented Skype. They wanted to talk to each other without getting out. But be it as it may, there are really two things I want to talk about today apropos of Estonia. High tech, Skype is part of that, music, and food. I mean, the important things in life. So actually, well, and architecture. Most of Estonian cities were obliterated completely, reduced to rubble in 1944 during World War II by the advancing Soviet army. But a large part of old city Tallinn did survive, and it's a wonderful tourist attraction and also a lovely place to be in. And I just wanted to share a few of my own pictures of Tallinn, old city. Now, I did mention food. Please forgive me. I normally don't do that, but Estonia is only the second place in the world where I bothered to take pictures of food after Japan. It's absolutely wonderful. This is proof that I was there in the interpreting booth, in the restaurant. And again, there is a reason why I'm showing pictures of food. They like to do things right in Estonia, and if they serve you bread, it is going to be served nicely and properly, and if they serve you salad, the color of the plate will be correct, and same goes for the soup, the appetizer, the main course, and the dessert. But food aside, please forgive me the weakness of showing pictures of the food. The other important thing that we all enjoy that comes out of Estonia is music. It's a little surprising to find out, to me at least it was, that by far the most frequently performed living composer is Estonian, whose name is Arvo Pärt. And he lived in the United States for some time, but his home is in Estonia, and he lives in Estonia. And he created a completely, original style of music. And I'm going to play a few minutes of Arvo Pärt's music, just so that we get it into our ears. And what he did was he combined Gregorian chant as well as Russian Orthodox prayer music with minimalism, a fashionable style in music at the time when he did it in 1970s, but still quite popular. And the result was very intense, spiritually very intense musical style. I'm going to play a short piece composed in 1978. It is called "Mirror in the Mirror." And see if you can recognize it, because many of us have heard it dozens of times in movies, in TV series, in soap operas, all over the place. So let me try playing this and see if you recognize it. Oops, huh? of the piece, but I thought that was a good place to stop and to give an idea of what Arvo Pärt's musical style is like. And at this point, I would also like to mention something else, and that is 3 days from now, on November 19th, Metropolitan Museum of Art there will be a concert there of Arvo Pärt's magnum opus, his major choral work. And, well, if anyone's interested, that is, as far as I'm concerned, a musical event of the year at Metropolitan Museum. So, so I thought I'd mention that. But let's go back to our presentation, and there is a reason why I am talking about music in this talk. And it goes back to 1848, really. I mentioned, apropos of Estonia's history, that the cultural identity of Estonia was always under threat because it was invaded by and occupied and controlled by so many major powers around it. So they had to do something to protect it. And let's recall what happened in 1848 in Europe. It is known as the year of the failed revolutions. All over Europe, and Estonia was not part of that, but all over Europe, different small countries, small nations were rebelling against imperial control or domestic tyrannical control, and one by one those revolutions were defeated, and in the wake of those revolutions political nationalism was outlawed completely. But in place of political nationalism, there emerged strong cultural nationalist movements, and we in the United States are also have also benefited from that. When one talks about cultural nationalism in the wake of the failed revolutions of 1848, one usually talks about Bohemian, Czech musical nationalism. And frankly, it is out of that Bohemian, Czech musical nationalism that ultimately American concert music came out. And that's another story, and I hope to talk about it in the spring during another presentation. But in the bottom line is, in the wake of the year of failed revolution, of the political oppression, the cultural nationalism flourished throughout Europe, and Estonia became part of that cultural national revival. In 1869, a wonderful tradition commenced in Estonia, a tradition of song festivals, where huge masses of people from all over the country would flock to festival grounds and sing national, not necessarily nationalistic, just national songs in the native language. And this is a photo of, now those festivals have been held every 5 years ever since. And now, it doesn't mean that no one sings in between those festivals. There are small festivals in towns and in the villages every year, every season, etc. But one of the hugest musical events in the world takes place in Tallinn every 5 years. Now, this is the festival grounds. This is the stage. The stage holds 30,000 singers. And sometimes it actually does have 30,000 singers in all singing the same chorus, or in the same choir. And the grounds in front of it hold anywhere between 100 and 300,000 people, depending on how tightly they're packed. So remember, the entire population of Estonia is 1.3 million. So it's like a quarter of the country's population can take part in the festival and have on important occasions. It's almost like 80 million people showing up at the Washington Mall, percentage-wise. And the song, and I would like to quote Venno Laul, an Estonian conductor, who said that the song festival for us is not only a musical event where we hear our best songs, but it was and still is primarily an opportunity to feel that we are Estonians. Which brings us to 1989, or even 1988. The independence movements of the late 20th century have mostly been given romantic names, like the Velvet Revolution, the independence movement against communism in Czechoslovakia, and later the color revolutions in the countries of the former Soviet Union. And of those non-violent revolutions, non-violent independence movements against communism, Soviet control, local corrupt or tyrannical control, of those color revolutions, the Estonian Revolution is distinguished by it was called the Singing Revolution, and because Estonia was always Estonian identity was always under threat. And at no time was it under greatest threat than during the Soviet period, where the Soviet authorities were flooding Estonia with ethnic Russians, hoping to, well, dilute and extinguish Estonian cultural identity. And it was during that time that singing Estonian songs was pretty much the last refuge of keeping Estonian identity. And it was no surprise that it was precisely the singing of songs that was a major part of the final push for independence in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And it was during that time that up to 300,000 people, a quarter of Estonian population, would be congregating at the song festival grounds, singing nationalistic songs, letting the Soviet authorities know that they're Estonians and they're not going anywhere and they want to have nothing to do with the Soviet communist rule. Now, it is difficult. I couldn't find any footage from that time, although of good quality, although I suspect it exists. But in lieu of that, just to give us a feel of what it must have felt and sounded back in the late 1980s at the festival grounds, I'm going to show a national, well, I wouldn't call it nationalistic, a national Estonian song sung by a large crowd of people at the festival grounds during the previous festival, the last festival of 2014. The song is called "The Bee Flies Back to Its Beehive." It can be considered as one of the unofficial Estonian anthems, and the words of the song are pretty much The bee flies from flower to flower, collecting nectar, but it always comes back to its hive because that is home. That is its home. And the weather might be bad, and it's hard work to fly from flower to flower, but the bee still comes back, braves everything, and still comes back to its hive because that's its home. And many bees don't make it, but still they all try to come back to its home. So that is a loose translation of the words, and the words are not important here. The important thing is I'm hoping to communicate the feeling as it must have existed back during the singing revolution. Oops.
Lauljad tahavad mesipuud.
That was the last music clip. So let's get closer to the actual stated title of the talk, which is Electronic Government. So Estonia did win its independence from the Soviet Union in 1991. And it is now, in a way, it's a typical European country with a parliamentary system, and there is a reason why it's a parliamentary system as opposed to presidential, because having been controlled by the Russian Empire, starting with 1721, and then after only a very brief period of independence after World War I, having been controlled again by the Soviet Union, occupied in 1939, and then controlled by Hitler's Germany, and then controlled again by the Soviet Union. The one thing Estonians were completely allergic to was anything that resembles totalitarianism or authoritarianism. So an authoritarian figure of the president would be an absolute no. So it's a parliamentary system, and well, they like to get things right in Estonia. That's the one thing I experienced while working there. And one of the things they wanted to get right is government. And if you look at the map of the former Soviet Union, frankly, it's one of the very few places that managed to get the government right. The other countries having anything ranging from medieval tyrannies to medieval-style tyrannies to plutocracies and kleptocracies. So Estonia, in that sense, is an example, and that's the reason why the House of Representatives Democracy Partnership Program chose Estonia as the place to hold regional conferences to teach good government to other countries of the former Soviet Union. So it is a parliamentary system. There are many parties, several very strong parties in the parliament. And how did they manage to get it right? It's frankly, the Estonian government system is an envy of the rest of Europe. So how could a 25-year-old country become a member of the rest of Europe? And that is due to the high-tech, interest in the high-tech. And which brings me to the One Book, One Campus program. And East Stroudsburg University for this year chose the Circle for the One Book, One Campus program. I don't want to talk much about this book. We all have heard something about it. But I would like to quote from it, from page 20 and 21 and 22 of the book, where it is explained what exactly the breakthrough, what exactly the innovation that the Circle did that enabled it to take over the internet and ultimately take over everything. I'll read. On one account, one identity, one password, one payment system per person. Your devices knew who you were and your own identity, and your one identity, the true you, was the person paying, signing up, responding, viewing and reviewing, seeing and being seen. The era of false identities, identity theft, multiple usernames, complicated passwords, and payment systems was over. Once you had a single account, it carried you through every corner of the web, every portal, every pay site, everything you wanted to do. End of quote from the Circle. Well, the Circle was released in 2013. And by that time, all of this was at least 10 years obsolete, because that had been implemented in Estonia in 2002. That exact system described as a major breakthrough in the beginning of Circle is exactly what Estonia had been using since 2002. It is called the Universal ID card, and since 2007, since by that time everyone in Estonia had a mobile device, it was also complemented by a mobile ID card. And that was pretty much the one, the true you, as called by Dave Eggers, the one identity so eloquently described by Eggers. And in Estonia, one uses that identity for anything that is government service or is related to government service. It's a government ID. Basically, it's a government ID. Like our social security number, even though we're careful to state that social security number is not an ID, a national ID, but it functions like one. And it is similar, except it is much better protected by means of internet security protocols. And this is a partial list of where Estonians would use the ID card. For all public services, like taxes, paying taxes, not surprising, but also for picking up your prescription drugs at the pharmacy. And also for applying or renewing driver's licenses, any social benefits. You use it when you vote during elections, and you vote online in Estonia if you choose to, and I'll talk about that later. For signing documents, and in Estonia, digital signature is legally equivalent to handwritten signature, and that is because the ID card, the electronic ID, is so well protected that there is wide universal trust in the electronic ID. If you want to look up your grades, that's what you do. If you go to a public school or a public university like ESU, you use it for bank transactions, for registering a new business, for buying bus tickets. This is a very partial list. Just about anything you do in Estonia is you use the ID card, and lately more and more the mobile ID card, basically your cell phone or your tablet. And here are some statistics for how many times Estonians supply digital signatures. Remember, the population is 1.3 million. In 2015, there were 66 million, 60 times more than the or 50 times more than the population, digital signatures. So everyone, on the average, provides a digital signature at least once a week. Which sounds about right. That's about how often we have to sign something. And it has been calculated that about 5 working days are saved by not having to go to some office to fill out, to sign a paper, but instead just signing on the internet. Now, how does all of that work? And in Estonia, and this goes back to the very beginning, 1991, when the newly independent country with a ruined economy after 40 years of Soviet mismanagement, and with ruined environment after 40 years of Soviet mismanagement, and without any private companies that are set up, and without, starting from scratch, basically, the government was in the position to invest. It was the only force in the position to invest in technology. And the view taken back then, as early as 1991, was that just as the government is responsible for providing the roads and the bridges, the physical infrastructure, it is also responsible, and just as it is responsible for providing legal infrastructure for businesses wanting to operate in the country and for individuals wanting to live there, it is also responsible for information and computer technology infrastructure. And what was built, beginning with as early as 1991, was what's called the Internet X-Road. And this is kind of what it looks like. These are the databases that contain the information. They are all protected by independent security servers. They can talk to each other, the databases can. They can, also there are portals here for citizens, for government workers, and for administrators of the whole system, as well as private companies, as well as multiple other entities. Everything here protected by its own independent security server, and it is really, I think it is really interesting for computer security majors to study the the security protocols used by those servers. Obviously, most of it is secret, but some of it is what we study in our math courses and in our computer science and computer security courses. So much of it is quite accessible to ESU students in those majors. Now, the principles for setting up those databases are any given piece of information is only stored in one place. For example, the person's name and address would only be stored in the population register and nowhere else. And the person's vehicle information would only be served in the vehicle register, and the person's health information would be served in the health register. And so if someone happens to breach one of those registers, let's say the health register, and steal some health-related data, they would not be able to, at least in principle, identify the person by name, only by very heavily encrypted electronic ID number, which and breaching the encryption of that is another matter. So Estonians claim, the proponents of the system claim that this provides better information security than just about any system anywhere in the world. And in fact, it has only been breached once in 2007 by no less than Russia, because Russia wanted to punish Estonia for doing something wrong from Russia's point of view, and Russia sent a warning by breaching Estonia's information security system, after which the systems were completely redesigned with state actors, like not just individual hackers, but state actors in mind, to make it hopefully unbreachable even by countries like Russia. But this is how it would work. I want to give you a few examples of how this system actually makes life easier. For example, when I got back from Estonia, the first thing I had to do was register my kids for kindergarten and second grade. And in order to do that, I had to provide immunization records and the latest physical to the school, or else they couldn't go to school. And that involved going to the pediatrician's office, waiting there, have them write things up and give it to me, and so half a day was wasted. The way it would have been done with the system would be, I would allow, with a digital signature, the school to access our kids' health information from this database, which would happen automatically with a few clicks of a mouse, and there would be no need for any physical trips and any physical paperwork anywhere. Doctors' offices in Estonia do not store patients' information because that is considered security risk. Anyone can easily hack a doctor's office or a computer, or physically break in and steal papers. All medical information is stored in this National Health Registry. As it is to some extent in our country. Because when we try to write medical expenses off our taxes, we supply all the information about all those medical expenses, including the test results, including everything, to the IRS. We do. So, and then we have no idea where and how that information is stored and what's done with it. So from the point of view of Estonian designers and proponents of this system, this is actually safer from the information security point of view, because any piece of information is only stored in one place, and anyone can monitor who has looked up. If I'm an Estonian, I can go in and see who looked up my address. I can see who looked up any of my health information, and if there was any unauthorized access, there are very stiff administrative and criminal punishments for unauthorized information access. So, but that's very briefly, in a few words, how the entire information system is designed. No one stores paperwork anymore. Everything is digital, everything is online, and the backup servers are in Finland and in Sweden and in other countries. Estonians are worried that Russia might invade someday and destroy all the documents, so for that reason it has backups in other countries where Russia cannot possibly reach them. So if there are no questions about this picture, and this only lists a very small number of databases. There are hundreds of databases linked to this system, and the system has worked so well that private businesses, all these are private businesses use this system as much as they can for their own business. They don't need to design their own payroll system, at least when it comes to taxation. They just access the government system that is secure and send all the taxes and all information there. Estonians don't wait for the government W-2 form to get to them. They just access their tax information in the appropriate government-run database. And there is no concern about identity theft in Estonia, because anyone can look up and monitor who has been accessing their information or acting in their name that is immediately visible. We have to pay for credit monitoring, for example. That is kind of a built-in feature in this system. Let's see, what else can I mention? Taxes. Pretty soon we'll have to pay taxes. An Estonian, when we tend to buy TurboTax or whatever it is and do our tax return that way, or pay to have it done. The way it works in Estonia is one accesses the e-tax system, and the taxes, the standard tax declaration is already done for them, because anytime anyone in Estonia earns money, the information goes immediately to the right database. And by the end of the year, by the time it's time to do the taxes, the standard tax declaration is done, and there is a choice. Either click submit, or click no, I want to do a custom one, if there are unusual business expenses or itemized deductions, etc., etc. So there is a choice, but it's kind of a perk provided by the system, the tax management, tax declaration system like TurboTax. So I could probably go on and on and on about the system, and in fact, much of my work in Estonia during the summer had to do with translating the explanation of a myriad of fine details of all of this to representatives from other countries who are planning to implement this in their countries. And by the way, similar systems have been implemented in a couple dozen countries worldwide, not necessarily on the national level. Some countries, large countries like the United Kingdom, view Estonia as a pilot project given its size and population size, and once all the glitches are ironed out and it works in Estonia, they import the system for themselves. And this is actually an item of a good revenue item for Estonian high-tech industry, the export of electronic government technologies. But let's talk about other aspects of government in Estonia. Transparency. One of the reasons why Estonian government is the envy of Europe, and certainly of the rest of the former Soviet Union, is its almost complete transparency. They've probably reached the highest level of transparency that's possible. And this is how the government works. There is a document exchange. Everything is digital. There are virtually no printouts. Everything has all the information on the screens. There is a general document exchange center to which state agencies and the parliament and the executive power and the media are connected. And the way that works is, or at least the way that looks from the outside, is as soon as a bill is introduced and some parliamentary committee, let's say, is working on a draft of the bill, as soon as that draft is submitted for consideration, unless it's a state security or some other matter, in which case there is an exception, as soon as that draft is submitted, everyone in the country can participate in the discussion. The media knows about what's in that draft. The constituency knows what's in that draft. One can immediately email your representative, hey, what the heck are you doing there? I don't want this in the draft. I want that in the draft, etc. So there is an opportunity for immediate feedback, and that is because the drafts are not on paper. The discussions are not on paper. They're on the computer screen, to which the rest of the country, unless it's a national security matter, of course, has access to. So the complete transparency of both the legislative and the executive processes from the very inception of a bill is what the founders of the new Estonian government back in 1991 were envisioning, and that is, at least in theory, at least if you're being idealistic, that's how it works. Now, finally, voting. We're almost out of time. We only have a few minutes left. Voting. Voting in Estonia is not mandatory, but 99% of Estonians, and probably more than that, do vote. And that is because you have a choice of voting online or in person. The way it works is there is a 10-day voting period for the general election. And there are 3 levels of officials to be elected: local elections, national elections, and European Parliament elections, almost like local, state, and federal election system in this country, the 3-layer system. And one can vote online, one can vote on a cell phone, and there are 7 days allowed for voting online, after which there is a 3-day period during which the list of those who have not yet voted online is compiled, and those who have not yet voted online show up at the elections, at the polling stations, at the election stations, and vote in person. That's how voting works there. Now, if you vote, and the vast majority, probably 95% of those who vote, vote online. And when you vote online, you can go into the system and check to see if your vote was correctly registered. So Florida 2000 would not have happened because anyone could go in and check to see that they voted for the right person. Also, one can change their vote if it was somehow incorrectly registered or some scandal became known to the public or whatever. One can change one's vote as many times as one chooses to using this system, but only with internet voting. And then, of course, there are questions of security. Is it possible to hack and manipulate the system? Well, and the Estonians, of course, claim that this is a more secure system than the traditional system, that it is more immune to voter fraud and manipulation. Well, for one thing, it gives everyone equal access to voting. I feel privileged here. I get into my car and drive to the polling station in any weather. I only have to be outside for 3 minutes. But other people have to either use public transportation or get stuck in traffic or whatever to get to the polling station. So this is a big equalizer in terms of access to voting. And the other aspect of it is at least, that's what the Estonians claim, it makes for more informed voting because many people during the election season, during the election time, while in the public transportation on the way home from work would actually research the candidate on their cell phone or a tablet and look up things like voting history for this or that candidate, look up things like committee meeting attendance for this or that candidate, look up pretty much the entire government or public service life of that candidate, which is also online, and look up a million other things, whoever wants to look up what, and which may or may not help them make up their mind with voting. And because there is a whole week allowed for voting, one can approach that slowly, one candidate at a time, one issue at a time, etc. And there are many, many other reasons why the Estonians claim that this is a safer system, but we're out of time. I think it was advertised as 5:30 to 6:30. Anyway, having talked about food at the beginning of the talk, I feel compelled to leave you some time for dinner, right? So I do want to show you some resources. I have just scratched the surface here. We could go on for years, but there is an interesting site called Estonia, Electronic Estonia, which provides quite a few more details on what I've been talking about, and please look that up. So